So the first thing we have to do is to, you received the minutes in your packet. We need approval of the minutes from the last meeting.
Also move.
Commissioner Nissen moves on the minutes. Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Commissioner Anderson seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, we have some agreements. Whoops. Oh, bills. We got to pay some bills. That's last month's meeting. We've got bills to pay. You also got those in your packet. I'd entertain a motion to pay the bills.
Also move. Corky Berg.
Commissioner Berg moves on the bills.
Second.
Commissioner Gardner seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries, and we have a couple of warrants to cancel.
Move cancellation of the warrants.
Commissioner Gardner moves on the warrants.
I'll second that.
Commissioner Nissen seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Now we are ready for some contract discussion. Who is up first? Michelle.
Good morning, Michelle.
Good morning. We have the biannual contract with the county attorney's office and the sheriff's office today. Year 2022 and 2023, no change in the contract amounts for this year. We have had significantly lower billings for the last couple of years due to the pandemic and decrease in legal actions, but I've chosen to keep those amounts the same because I anticipate that those costs will increase again. I'm seeing that already, so.
Do we have any questions for Michelle? And you're looking to approve this agreement today? So I'd entertain that motion.
I will move approval of the
Commissioner Gardner
agreement.
moves approval. Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Commissioner Berg seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you.
Oh, sure.
We are way ahead of schedule. So, under a general business discussion, we're going to have licensing of mental health and annual report from Corinne.
Good morning.
Good morning.
This morning, I
For the
am
record, and I'm sorry, Michelle, I should have had you do that to state who you are and who you represent.
Corinne Torkelson, and I'm one of the social service supervisors with Candidacy County Health and Human Services.
Thank you.
What I am doing today is I'm hoping to be able to finish up with my annual report from 2020. The first area that we're going to start with is the licensing area. And Candidacy County Health and Human Services has the responsibility to license the family child care, adult foster care, and family children's foster care. And we'll start talking first about the family child care. And we have currently, or in 2020, we had 89 licensed homes. And what we are seeing is that this is a major decrease. If you look at the figures in 2015, we had 113. So we've seen a drop in 24 homes since then. This obviously is concerning. And this isn't just Candidacy County. There are struggles for daycare providers across the state. And what we're seeing is a variety of things. One of them is just people aren't interested in doing the work. There's higher expectations and requirements that people are finding challenging. And we also have a group who are retiring. We've had some really long-standing providers and are at that point now of retiring. So we have probably 3 or 4 that are looking to close. Most of those are retirements, but now just yesterday, Jill told me that she's had 5 interested people, and so that's a positive thing. You never know what that interest right now, where that will look, if they'll become fully licensed or not. But we are seeing this as a challenge across the county. And obviously in 2020, our daycare providers are challenged with all of the COVID responsibilities. And they really stepped up. They did a lot of good work on trying to maintain their homes, keeping their homes open when possible. We did have a couple who had to close just temporarily for COVID exposures and those sort of things, but they really did step up in 2020 and continue to do that obviously now in 2021 as well. And when we think about infant care is the highest need, obviously, for daycare, and we have providers who are telling us they have wait lists on people who are thinking about getting pregnant, and they're putting themselves on a wait list. And so the need is great. And obviously, when there's daycare issues, that's a ripple effect. That's affecting a wide variety of things. In particular, people can't go out and get jobs and do what they need to be doing if they're struggling with being able to find daycare. So it's causing some issues. Again, it's not just a Kansas County issue, it's an issue across the state. One of the things we're having conversations about is how to look at a recruitment sort of a concept, and what are things we could do to try to be enticing some of that interest. And a lot of it is a word by mouth sort of a thing. But that's one of our hopes of 2021, even though we only have a couple months left here, to really keep moving forward and seeing is there some things we as a county can do to be looking at some recruitment possibilities. It's a business, and we're supporting that business by doing the licensing process. And so trying to see how we can move forward is on our plate and trying to determine that. Questions as far as on daycare?
Yes. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Corinne, this is really an important issue right now, because if we're looking at increased housing opportunities in the county, increased employment opportunities in the county, I don't know where people are going to go for daycare. If I recall correctly, we were something like 800 plus openings short throughout the entire county as of just a few years ago.
Yeah, when they had done, and I wasn't supervising at that time, but when they had done the Children's First, I believe it was 700 on some homes. With the work that they did in the study that they did, they were anticipating they were about 700 and some short.
And this was pre-COVID, of course.
Definitely pre-COVID. Yeah, that's probably, I bet that was 5 years ago when they had done that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I would say that probably hasn't changed. If anything, maybe has increased. One of the things that for you to realize that we only license the family foster homes, daycare homes, those where they're doing care in their homes. Mm-hmm. The state then licenses the centers. And I know that they're at the same situation, challenged to be able to fill the slots, be also challenged right now with staffing issues for the centers as well.
Are the standards that you enforce for licensing state standards also?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this is traditionally a pretty low-paying profession, correct?
Right. Yeah. One of the things that's happened through the years is the benefit, but also the drawback of child aware, of trying to increase our level of quality. Not that we didn't have quality, but trying to increase the level of more child development things happening in daycares, more almost preschool sort of things happening in daycares, which is great. That's an excellent thing. But I think what also has happened in that is that there are some providers, some of our longer standing providers, like, I just want to provide care. And I don't want to worry about putting together curriculum, for example, or some of those sort of things. And so I think trying to find that balance in that, we've maybe lost some people because of that, even though it's a good thing to be happening for kids. We've also, I think that's a challenge for some providers. So I think that's created some changes through the last few years as well.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
I think you covered it, but I think the school districts, and they follow under the state, the ones that have kind of some preschool type or daycare type of operations going on. in
Yes,
schools.
yeah. If they're the center, then yes, the state does the licensing on that.
Okay.
Yep, yeah. Yeah, and there is a, with it, under the state level, where school districts, on some churches, those sort of things, where they can create a center within their under their umbrella, if you will, and they are at the state level.
Okay.
One of the things that people are looking at across the state as well is there is the ability now to do what they're calling pods. And so some of that is, so maybe you have someone who buys a building and has that ability, has the space availability, and within that building, you may have 3 or 4 providers. They're considered separate areas and separate daycares, but then it's not having to do it in your home. It's that ability you're not a center, but yet you're also not in the home, and that ability for those pods, if you will, to happen within one setting or one building, but looked at as being separate providers, separate licenses within. And I know that is happening more across the state. We don't have one of those within Candido County at this point. And so that's a new and upcoming situation just in the last year, that's been a change of the under licensing, that you can do it that way as well. So hopefully that may open some other doors as well.
Actually, Stevens County is doing it as we speak.
Yeah.
They're spending $1 million of their ARP dollars for that. And their pods, as I understand it, are going to be some of the major employers of the area, like Superior Industries, and I forget who the other ones are, but so that's a nearby model that can be observed as it takes place. I want to go back to something you said almost in the beginning of your presentation about the numbers dropping from a level to 24, I think you said now.
Yeah,
Those are all in-home, not
yes,
centers.
yeah.
Okay.
So we dropped from 2015 to 2020, we dropped 24 homes.
And so the
24
5 that are
licenses.
pending or showing interest, they're also in-home.
Yes, yeah, because those are the only ones that we're involved in and that we license are the in-home ones.
So, and again, I'm not advocating, some of you probably saw this recently on the news about what many countries in the world spend as governments on childcare assistance. And the United States, out of about 20 countries, fell dead last at $500 per child. It was led by Norway at 29,726, and everything in between. But it does really demonstrate that we put a different value on childcare here than a lot of places.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
just a quick question on this number of 89. Does that include the YMCA childcare provisions?
No, because that would be considered a center. And so these are just in-home, where the provider lives in the home that the care is being given.
And other than the 2 Ys, are there other options like that in the county? I know there was one going to open, but I don't know if they ever made it out in the industrial park.
Yeah, I don't believe that one has opened, at least not yet. Loving Arms, Cardinal Place. Yeah, there are a variety of centers within Candido County as
In
well.
West Campus.
The campus, yeah. So, which is,
So there are those options as well.
yes, yes,
Mr.
yeah.
Chair.
So these numbers are just about the in-home
Okay.
places.
Commissioner Gardner.
And just to piggyback on what the chair indicated, I am aware that there is some movement within the county to look at the pod model as a possibility for some daycare options in the future, but that's very early on.
One of our partners in the daycare is under the UCAP. They have the childcare aware, and they work really close with providers to be able to look at how to build your business, number one, if you're a new provider, but also that ability of capacity and what that looks like, and what are some of those other options in those as well. And so we're having regular conversations with them as well.
And there are other entities working on it as well, so.
Pardon me?
There are other entities working
Okay.
on it as well, so.
Okay.
It seems like between childcare and affordable housing, workforce housing, those are the two things that are going to really stymie economic growth in this area.
Correct.
If you think about the new distribution center that's coming out, 500 jobs, I mean, if those are family age workers doing that, those kids are going to have to go somewhere as they work those shifts, so.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Next up, as far as licensing, is our adult foster care. We have really maintained our corporate foster care homes very consistently in numbers, and that basically is because right now there's a moratorium on development. That moratorium has been in place for a number of years. And so our numbers have been very consistent through the years with that. Obviously, again, with COVID, they've had many struggles throughout COVID. They've really did step up and be able to continue to provide for the clients, trying to do best in looking at the COVID restrictions. But that obviously created challenges for them throughout the year as well. We have the 125 licensed homes, and that's across 8 corporate providers. And so within Candido County, we have 8 corporate providers, and those 8 providers have 125 homes. And in those homes, typically have 3 to 4 clients. There are some homes that are less than that. There may be homes that are just for one client due to the particular needs of that client. And so there's a wide number of clients within that 125 homes that are across the county. Again, we're staying very consistent in the numbers. Our biggest challenges, which is happening now, is the workforce shortage. We have some of our providers that have closed homes, meaning that they've combined, that maybe they had 2 clients here and 2 clients here, and so now they've combined those homes and closed out a home. And so they're faced with a fair amount of challenges that are going on from a staffing angle for them as well. And so we're seeing that in our adult foster care homes as well. But they've really stepped up and trying to provide the best care that they're able to provide, and trying to be creative in how to make that work best.
And again, those are low-paying jobs as well.
Correct. Yes. I mean, reimbursement is a
theme
huge
here.
issue across all of our programming, on that you can go out and make a salary at Aldi's for more than you would if you were going to be working at an adult foster care home. It's the reimbursement rate it's just not there. And our providers can only offset that as much as they can with that reimbursement rate. And so that's very challenging. And then we were seeing some of that challenge about service providers and staffing even before COVID. And then obviously COVID has just put a different layer, or increased layer on that for our providers across all of our programming.
Any other questions or
Yeah, I
comments?
have one.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I was just going to ask, is this in addition to like the state system? Because there's group homes that are run by the state, is am I
Yes.
correct on that?
So we have some state adult foster care homes in Candido County.
Yeah.
What we do in adult foster care homes is we are licensing the physical plant.
Okay.
And then DHS does the licensing pieces of programming. So we license the state homes that are in Candido County based on their physical plant. That's the piece that we're looking at, that our requirements are in adult foster care.
Okay, so that's including all that.
Yes, yeah, that would be included in those numbers. Yeah, there are 2 state homes in Kennewick County. They call them Minsox homes in Kennewick County.
Question
Next,
for-
oh, sorry.
I'm sorry.
I would like to jump back to child foster care homes again. And the number's gone up. I'm really kind of surprised. I'm a little worried that child foster care will go the same direction as daycare type of thing.
Yeah, our foster care has gone down.
Oh, it is, okay.
Our total numbers, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, our total numbers of homes have decreased by that 24, not increased by that 24
Oh,
of our licensed family child care homes.
okay, then the number looks different here to me, but alrighty.
From the 113 down to the 89.
Oh, I think he's talking about child
The
foster.
line
He's talking about foster
below.
care.
Child
Oh,
foster care.
sorry, I'm sorry. I thought you jumped back to
Yep,
child
no,
child
I
daycare.
actually
I'm
want
sorry.
to focus on child foster care because it's such an important service to the county forever.
Right.
And they are the ones that have to take the children in the middle of the night under certain circumstances, and they provide that care that these children are missing. And they get very little reimbursement too from the county as well.
Right.
Yeah, but I see the number of child foster care homes has actually gone up. That is.
Yeah, and so that's the next part that I was going to talk about is
Oh,
the
okay,
child
I'm
foster
jumping
care.
ahead.
Is
I
the
thought I
child
was
foster
going
care
back. I was
piece.
going down the list. I thought, well, you kind of skipped over that.
Way to get ahead of me, Craig.
Sorry.
And the child foster care is obviously, again, a very critical service that is being provided in Kennewick County, and also has had challenges in 2020 throughout the COVID pieces as well. But again, they also have stepped up and really have continued to provide a level of care for our kids that are needing that care, and also taking in kids that they knew were coming from COVID situations. And so they really have stepped up and continue to do that. We have seen an increase in, it used to be, again, this is my telling you how long I've been here. It used to be that foster care, child foster care really was on somebody who thought about being a foster parent, somebody who spent months probably thinking about that, spent months getting licensed, spent months, is this going to work for our family? Isn't this going to work? Those sort of things. And that's where kids were placed, were in those homes. What has happened through the years is a requirement now that we're required when we're placing children to look to relatives. So some of that increase that we have seen through the past few years has been that relative care. Your challenge in your relative care is that a lot of these relatives, they're getting the phone call. And they're getting the phone call and saying your niece, your nephew, your grandchild, whatever, had to be removed from their home. Are you willing and wanting to take them into your home? When the county, in most of those situations, the county gets custody of the child. When the county gets custody of the child, then that relative is required to start the licensing process. There's a lot involved in that. And so these relatives are not somebody who thought, oh, maybe I want to be a child foster care provider. Maybe I should think about this. How would this fit with our family? What is that process? They're truly getting the phone call and they're taking those kids in today on sort of a situation. And then the rest of the story comes with the licensing and what's involved in that process, what's involved in being able to provide for that child, the expectations on foster parents to help get a kid to therapy, for example, or getting the child to a visit with the parent. And so there's a lot of expectations, a lot of things that foster parents, above and beyond just caring for the child, that we help and work with them on to be able to support the rest of the story as well. So even though we ended 2021 with 41 licensed homes, we had 38 at that time that were in the process at one place or another. And again, majority of those being our relative foster care homes. And so, and again, you may have a relative who starts that process, and the licensing process takes time. And by the time they're done, that child may be able to reunify with their family. So it's an ever-flowing, that when I say that 38 number, that at every different level of the process, those 38 people add, and some of them will finish out because the child remains with them. Some of them won't because the child was reunited with their family. Some of them will say, well, even though my relative isn't with me anymore, I like this and I would like to be able to continue to provide that. So they're at so many different levels, and they're at pending different things that are happening for that child, making a difference then if they finish out their license or not. So we have seen that increase, you're right, Commissioner, but that increase is the relative piece. That's increasing that. On our traditional, what we call traditional foster care homes, those have stayed fairly steady, the numbers through the years. It's the relative that's really creating that increase in those numbers. And we're really in need of respite providers as well, and that respite being, maybe they're just going to take a child for the weekend, but they still have to have all the licensing pieces done. So that's a challenge as well.
So by and large, go ahead.
No,
Go ahead.
Just a follow-up question. The county used to have a foster care appreciation program yearly. Now with all the changes, is that still taking place?
We try to do something every year. Obviously, last year, what we did, we mailed out things to them versus having a banquet, if you will, or we've done things at the park and the kids were able to come and the workers would go with the kids while we were doing some appreciation things with the parents, or we've had banquets in the past. So there's been a variety of things that we've done each year. Last year, obviously, with COVID, we didn't do that. So we try to acknowledge them in some way every year.
Understanding the challenges faced by a family gets a phone call, as you say. Two questions about that. Does it cost money? Does it cost that family money over and above what we're able to provide for subsidy for that placement of those kids? And that's the first question. And the other question, do they generally turn out, and this is probably a judgment call for you, do they turn out as a positive influence, or is that family taking them under some duress and not really wanting to be doing that?
Your first question, as far as cost, they're not reimbursed for what the potential could be. Think about if you had 3 kids move into your home tomorrow. And particularly if you get 3 teenage boys that are moving your home tomorrow, there's no reimbursement to cover that food cost. But what I'm saying is they really don't have, they're not getting that, they're not getting paid, they're getting reimbursed. And so the sense of child foster care, it's not a moneymaker situation. It is not something that you're going to make enough money to allow you to stay home and not work. That's not at all what's happening in the child foster care. It's a basic rate. And what happens in Minnesota is it's called MAPC. What you do is you plug in the needs of the child, and that gives you your rate. So it's not something that Kandiwai County says, oh, we're going to pay you $500 a day. Oh, that kid's easier. We're going to pay you $300. It truly is a program that the workers are required to plug in with the needs of that child and what the foster parents are going to be doing for that child. And then that creates your rate. But it's not a payment. It's a reimbursement. And so, no, they don't. They are... majority are spending more than they're making in that situation. Your next question about is it successful or not? I think the answer to that is some are and some aren't. What we know is that families are wanting to be there for their relatives. They are wanting to do what's best, but there's a lot of responsibility that's put on in that situation. And so when you maybe aren't necessarily prepared for that, then you might not be able to do the long term on that. Obviously, the hope of relative care is that the child is being placed with someone they hopefully know. And that hopefully in that knowledge of who that is and who's going to be providing care for you is less trauma than if you were going to be placed with a stranger. I mean, that's the general why we look to relatives to do that. But there are challenges in that, and And people with all good intention in the end may not be able to maintain that foster care situation.
And is there a hierarchy in that search for the relative? Do you start with the grandparents, then go to aunt or uncle, or how?
Yeah, there's statutorily, there's kind of a list, if you will, about who we should start with. Different things make a difference we have to do initial, what we call walkthroughs. We have to see that their home is appropriate, and we have to complete that within the first 72 hours. And then we also initially are doing background checks. So we're checking our social service system, and we're checking the criminal background checks. So those are things that have to be done like immediately. And kind of went off on a tangent here. I lost track of your question.
About the success of the in-home family placements, and because, sometimes the issues caused by the need for foster children are a culture that goes back a couple generations possibly.
Right. And those are things that we are able to tease out with family. Number one, obviously, we're starting with the parent. If the parent is in a position to be able to be having conversations about who would be the best to help provide care for your child, we start there. And then we're working down that list. So is that grandma and grandpa? And then we're having that immediate conversation with grandma and grandpa. So grandma and grandpa might be able to say, no, I can't. But I think Aunt Susie is, because Aunt Susie's been able to separate herself from the issues of the family, for example, those sort of things. And so it's a constant teasing through some of those sort of things with the families, and that the workers do on a regular basis, and our licensor as well.
Thank you. Any questions?
Other questions on licensing at all? All right, then I'm going to move on to mental health, which is the last area that I haven't had a chance to report yet with you guys. And it's such a simple and quiet program. Adult mental health, we'll start with adult mental health. And obviously, again, I feel like I keep saying the same thing about COVID, but COVID has created things throughout each and every one of our programs, and mental health is not an exception to that. Obviously, with the different waivers that happened throughout the COVID period in 2020, we were able to do a lot of virtual work was done, but we were out knocking on doors to those people that we really felt needed to have that face-to-face contact, be able to assess where they were at with their mental health, what those needs were. Those sort of things. It really created that thinking outside the box, and how can we make some of those contacts, and how do we, in reality, our workers really stepped up, because a lot of providers weren't able to make those face-to-face contacts, your arms workers, for example, or your ACT workers. And so that ability for our workers to be really, in the end, made more contact than they probably typically would make in their case management roles. For those who aren't aware, on the adult mental health, the cases that we have that meet the statutory requirement that we need to meet need to be identified as serious and persistently mentally ill. And so we're not working with people who are maybe just struggling with a grief situation, for example, or a minor depression. These are people who are seriously and persistently mentally ill. So they've had a pattern of things that have happened for them, and they're meeting that criteria. That criteria, or that diagnosis, if you will, needs to be identified by a mental health professional. And then once that is identified, then our role kicks in which we are doing case management. We are working with that client to set goals. What are things that they want to work on to be able to maintain, either recover and maintain, or at least maintain what their mental health status is, and how they can move ahead if there are struggles that they are having due to their mental health. Another part, and those are voluntary services. If people have to ask for the service, obviously, if people don't want to continue with the service, if we don't have any concerns about on their level of mental health that would raise to a commitment level, then we're not able to stay involved if they don't want us to be involved. The piece that is not voluntary for us is our commitments. And what those are is that someone who has been working with or has had contact with a client believes that client's mental health is such that they are making a statement in support of commitment. On a majority of those commitments, you'll be seeing obviously from a mental health professional or a medical doctor who has had some history with that person, is able to be assessing what that their current functioning is, and that ability to be able to determine if they are a danger to self or others. That's the key phrase that happens in commitment, that they are a danger to self or others. And so they may be struggling with their mental health. They may be hearing voices. They may be doing not well in their mental health, but they still might not meet that level of danger to self and others. And I think those are some of the struggles calls that we get. Well, but they still don't come up to that level of commitment status. I'm worried about our commitment numbers. In 2019, we had, in 2020, as of this time last year, we had 38. This year, we are at 51. So there has been a major jump in our commitment work. And this obviously it's challenging work for our workers. These are people who are really at the worst of their worst. And so it's also those commitment areas where some of the mental health system is broken. As far as bed availability, as far as stepping down once you get in the hospital, those sort of things. These are the people who end up at our regional treatment centers, ANOCA. These are the people then who are level out in hospitalization, and then we can't find the next step down, and you're paying $1,600 a day for them. So these are, even though there are a small percentage of the work, of the numbers we have, they are the most challenging of clients that we work with, and challenging of system issues that we work with. And so those are numbers that we're going to have to pay attention to and be able to sort through. The workers are really working hard at trying to keep people in situations out of regional treatment centers. But there are those that's where they need to be. It's for their safety and their protection. That is where they need to be. Some of the increases that we've seen in our commitments is due to the Rule 20s. And what a Rule 20 is, it's someone who's had a criminal charge, but they're found to be incompetent at the criminal level. And so if someone is found to be incompetent, then the pre-petition screening for commitment then kicks in. The judge's order for that to happen. And then that's where we kick in. We need to make do that petition. We need to determine if they're a danger to self or others, and then that gets sent to the county attorney's office, and then that's the court process that happens. So we have seen an increase, and I meant to grab those numbers and I forgot to do that. The Rule 20 numbers as to what those, if we comparing even like 19 to 20 or 21 here, and I don't need to look at them to know that we definitely have seen an increase in those. Those are some of those who are sitting in the jail, or some of those who are in the community, and the criminal piece wasn't able to go, and then some of those we've been able to support commitment, and some of those we haven't been able to support commitment. So that is, the Rule 20s are definitely having a role in our commitment numbers. Questions on the adult mental health?
Commissioner Berg.
Yeah, a couple other, and we're going to run out of time here. Doing pre-petition screenings, is that pretty much the same as it always has been? You have to do a report of the background information. It kind of reminds me of some of the community corrections that have to go through as well. And alternatives considered, and then also having to testify in court as
Yes,
to your
yeah.
report, the same.
Yeah, and we have timeline requirements. So once we get a statement in support of commitment, we have 72 hours to begin that process. Typically, we're starting that quicker just because depending upon where the person is at and what the safety issue is. And then, yes, and that we're gathering all of that information. And then within 5 days, the 72 hours is about beginning the process and getting that going. And then within 5 days, we're required to have that final decision, what our current decision is, and then get that off to the county attorney's office, which then, if they're going to support it as well, then gets to a court process. And then that court process kicks in different timelines based on the hearing requirements as well. But yes, it is gathering all that information. It's trying to have a conversation with the client. It's trying to talk to family members who may have information, gathering any information from any providers that may be involved with the person as well.
May I follow up?
Yes.
Mr. Chair? Yeah, that's one a week almost. And that's your case managers, that's taken out of the time they're doing their case management. So you're figuring in at least 2 hours or 2 days a week just doing that, I would guess.
Yes, that we have that time. One of the things that we had been doing through the years, we've switched a little, and we had tried to create like a commitment worker who that was their focus, but then the numbers have gotten too high, and it gets to be too much for one person to take that on. Also, just the struggles of that and the stress that can be involved in that type of a case. And so now we're back to doing a rotation across all of our mental health workers on that.
It's my understanding is, just kind of switching gears a little bit about the funding of all this, and with the Rule 20s and the commitments, can you just share with us just briefly a little bit about the county responsibilities? Or not only do we have the funding to do all, we have no funding to do.
Yeah,
we have to pay for the services to make this all happen, but then once it happens, the county ends up paying for most of the services?
Yeah, a lot of the services, when you think of mental health service, a lot of those are covered under a healthcare plan. As far as if there's counseling or it's an armed service or, day treatment, those sort of things. But when you get to that level of commitment and you're doing more hospitalization, most initial hospitalization is covered by your health plan. It is when they don't meet that criteria and something needs to happen, that's when the cost to the county comes in. When someone is stuck, if you will, at the regional treatment center and there's not the next step down in that capacity to meet that need. If they're not meeting that hospital level of care, that's when the 100% kicks in for the county to pay for that. And so there's a high cost for that. Our reimbursement, about case management, we'd put hours and hours on a client, and our current adult mental health reimbursement, I think, is $180 a month. So it really has tanked through the years. So.
Thank you. It's just about time to wrap up.
Okay, I just got
Sorry.
2 seconds.
I'm sorry.
I got
2
one
seconds.
question.
Oh, okay.
You have here no response to intake letter, and then there's a refused at point of intake. The refused at point of intake, is that the individual decided they don't want to?
Yes. So they had, typically what that means is they had initially said either they called in themselves and asked for it, or they had someone else make a referral. Maybe it was a professional that they were working at. And then when we met with them, they said, no, I really don't want this service. And again, that the intake section, if you will, that is based on the voluntary services and the number of requests that we get and the people's follow through, if you will, on that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. The only other thing that I had was child foster care. And again, we could go on for a long time about, children's mental health. We already did child foster care. Children's mental health. Again, COVID has created a variety of things, but what we're staying fairly consistent in numbers. I would anticipate that those numbers, as schools continue to be in session, as kids are getting introduced to school in that process, that we'll begin to see some of those numbers increase, which is typical in the fall, that we see some of those numbers increasing. Again, our role in that is that they have to meet a mental health diagnosis of severe emotionally disturbance that a mental health professional needs to do, and then they're referred for case management services. And again, we've stayed fairly consistent in the last couple of years as far as numbers along that line. Really, COVID has created that think outside the box like it has for every other program. Children's mental health is no different than that. Much more challenging to be trying to do some virtual things with some of our kids. And so trying to think about how else can we try to meet some of those needs as well. So.
Commissioner Burke.
Just real quickly, I just want to say thank you, Corinne. I serve on a couple of committees that you've been talking about, or related to what you've been talking about, and you do a fantastic job, and I want to say thank you. I'm really glad you're the supervisor over the children and adult mental health and licensing. Nice job.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Larry, thank you.
Thanks.
All right, thank you very much, Corinne. And Ginny has informed me that she does not need to do any administrative updates, so I will adjourn this meeting.